everyone. So welcome to our Sunday. I guess this is now afternoon here in British Columbia. We're doing a segment that is called Finding Ready-Made Mechanics. And so I think you saw in the previous like a little post that we created. I showed this particular container with this mechanics right here. So this is what I'm talking about with the ready-made mechanic, is that there are so many things out there that is meant for something else that really so often, if you really look at it, you see a potential in how it could be used in floral design. And so this is a piece, this is the glass kind of a sculpture that I found at HomeSense. So that would be like Home Goods, I guess in the States. In Canada, it's HomeSense. And they're in the interior decor part. You know, there's lots of glass, this and that, and vases and all of that, and just little ornamentations for the home. And this happens to be one of those kind of like an orb-like twisted glass piece that you would just put on the shelf or in a pair, like a pairing, maybe on the top of the mantelpiece, what piece to put on the coffee table. You know, it's just one of those like kitschy little item that's perfect for decor. But the first thing I saw in it was like, oh my God, it's just the absolutely the perfect mechanic for flowers. And so I wanted to, since we posted that picture of this particular container with this in it, since then I've had various revelations. I mean, this just happens to me all the time. Like overnight I was thinking about it some more, and I thought, well, it's not just limited to that particular container. There's a relationship with those two because of the color, and I like the footed look, and then to create some sort of elegance coming out of that vase. But then this morning I posted a design for from the virtual Patreon post or the program the other day, and one of the design that we created in the horizontal flowering. And I talked about in that post, because this is what often happens, I just intentionally start out as a post, but then I start to tell a story that spins off of it. And it was about creativity and the potential of so many creative possibilities when you really think about it, when you have time to really think about it, and applying different mechanics, little tips, just little ideas combined together can become something really substantial. And the more that you know, the more opportunities that you have. So based on that post this morning, and I was thinking about it, the first thing I wanted to do was come downstairs to the studio and look in my cabinet to see what other containers that I can use with this particular found mechanic. And the first one I found was this glass, like the square clear glass container. And I just wanted to show you how that could be used like this. So with a clarity, you see everything about it. But the thing is, how do you keep this particular mechanic in this corner so that it wouldn't move once you start the design? Because that's the problem with this mechanic, is that it can roll depending on how much flowers you put in what spot. So it needs to be stationary and static. So the way I did that, and I did this in advance, it's not cheating. I did it in advance so that you wouldn't see so many failures in the process. What I used was Torca, which is really a strip willow that I purchased from IKEA bundles. And I used it in different thickness because it gives you different flex with a different thickness. And what I did was thread it through so that it sort of catches from corner to corner. That's the strongest way to wedge something to make it stay in place. I mean, this is solid right here because it has 3 pieces of this Torca branch, the willow branch, just wedged in between, and it pushes this to the back end because with a flex, especially with the 2 of the stems that has a flex in it. The one that's going straight across is just wedging it in place, but the other 2 pushes it into that corner so it doesn't move at all. Like I'm trying to move it forward that way, but it won't because it's wedged in. I wanted to show you that because what I would do in advance if I were doing this is I would actually go and cut a fresh piece of branch because it has so much more flex and it gives you even more dynamic kind of wedging. But even if I have this Torca, which is very dry because it's being dried and being stored, you know, it's selling on the shelf of IKEA. So it's very dry. What I would do is actually soak it in water so to make it slightly pliable so that it doesn't break as much. because I think I went through 2 long stems of different sizes and different flecks to get these 3 to stay in place. So there were maybe 5 other failures where it broke, and I just didn't want to do that in front of you guys. I just thought I would do this so I could show you the final result. But I wanted to start out with this because this is one possibility. I'm going to go back to the original concept of this container, but I wanted to show you the diversity, because with anything you want to make sure what its abilities are in relation to what container that you're going to use. So I'm going to take that out and go to the next option. Let's see. Okay. So the next option is this one, because this is another container that I found that I have that is potentially possible for this design. And the beauty of this one is it's very shallow, so that there's water, but the thing is, you have to make sure when you put this in this container, it's probably best to lean to one side as well instead of right smack in the center. And actually, I think it looks better when it's asymmetrical placement anyway, and it rests like this. But with this one, what you're gonna need to do to make it stay in place, I mean, there's lots of different things. You think like you can use that stickum, you can use all these kind of materials that we have in the floral industry to be able to, make it stay in place. But what I really feel is the best is like real wrapping and attaching to the container. So I'm going to use these little, actually these are actually like a Middlino extender, but I'm going to actually call these actually Middlino wire vine, because it's really kind of mimicking a vine. And it's much thinner because it has maybe 1 Middlino in it plus the aluminum wire. And then it tapers out to, and I'll probably produce a little video on it because there's a little bit of a trick to it. So what I'm going to do with this one is thread it through this structure right here. And I am going to actually run it underneath like this to one side. Maybe bring it a little bit further so I can see the tip of it. So bring it so that it wraps around like a vine, because that's the beauty of this one. And then bring it around so that it catches and secures it by maybe this is just a little bit different in the way it's coming out. It's a little bit more centered than I intended, but you can certainly change that. But if you do this, then it's catching on that side and that side. And so really it stays in place because it doesn't slide downward or it doesn't slide upward. It's caught in place. And actually, the tighter you put this together, the better it becomes. So now, so that it doesn't look like it is intentionally just mechanical, then what you do is you're going to take a piece like this and bring this inside so that maybe, well, let's see. These are just like the tendrils on the vine. That's why I call it the vine wire. So that it's like this, and maybe this grabs hold of that one, and that you can start to now have this as a part of the design element so that it becomes part of the design that helps give you a little bit more of the silhouette of the design and the linear kind of movement through the design, so that it turns what is mechanical purpose intentions down below into that it's purposeful up top as well. So this is a way then you can design into this and it stays in place. The only thing with this particular concept, this particular mechanic, is that the water only goes to, just flush with this lip, certainly probably less below, and then it dries, so evaporates, so it goes lower and lower, which means that every flower stem that you put into this particular mechanic must go almost to the very bottom to make sure that the flowers don't dry up really quickly from being suspended in this and not catching water. So that's the one thing that you have to remember when you use it this way, because everything is very visible and you can see when water is not drinking. But there's a certain beauty to the fact that it's all visible and that it's all stays together and that it's solid mechanic. So this is really a great sort of extension of Middlino extender, but it's used more to be more finessing the ends, the tendrils, and all of that. So when you attach to this, it gives an extra support, but at the same time, it melts into the living vines that you work with it. Or you can allow the vine to really wrap around this so that then it becomes camouflaged behind the actual fresh material. So this is another option that I wanted to show you, because I think for me, teaching for me is exciting, because I can exercise in my head all the things that I know so I can share with you. If Hitomi had this, what would she do? And what kind of mechanical tools, what kind of mechanical systems, what kind of techniques that are often used for something else that could really be used right here. And so you get to test out all its possibilities. And that's the reason why I said in the post today that at the end of my life, I can see myself just drifting off and dreaming of millions of other ideas that I had that I still hadn't yet explored. And I just think that just feels so good. There's a lot inside that still needs to add up to something. And, that's why it's so important to try to learn as many things as possible, mechanically, just plant knowledge-wise, all of that. And it's really the use of that in various ways through the application of principles of design that you can test out its potential to get different effects. Because principles are really the basic knowledge that allows you to accomplish a certain result, and that can become the basis for that thinking. If I want balance, what do I need to do to get that balance? So anyway, that was the other, because, like in this kind of tutorial, I want to share with you multiple things. And this just gives you two different options with two different containers.
I just want to quickly jump in here.
Yeah.
I'm not on camera, guys, but I'll be fielding questions. So if anybody has questions at any point, please feel free to ask, and I'll forward them to Hitomi. But I just wanted to let her know that we do have people, viewers from the U.S., U.K., Pakistan, Brazil, and from Ottawa, Canada. So
that is so cool.
So thank you for joining us.
I am really loving more and more. I mean, at the very beginning, when this whole COVID thing started and I knew I was going to be quarantined for many months, I wondered, what am I going to do?
Ireland as well.
Oh my gosh, okay. And so, because my thing is, sharing my knowledge. And of course, we started to do a lot of videos, and this is one way that I know that I can share the knowledge. But to be able to do this in front of you guys so that you can ask questions, I think is really even more exciting. So I'm getting used to this, and we're going, Colin and I with technology, because he's a tech whiz and I'm just the designer. But we can think together and come up with really, really great solutions, I think. So anyway, with this one, look how well this fits right in. And what this does is really make this whole setup here, the container, very blue. So I'm going to approach this like I think I mentioned also in the post about how when you know more, you have the ability to be a better problem solver, troubleshooter. So if you were competing and you were doing a surprise package and you hadn't seen any of this stuff before, you open the box and here's what you have. And you have 30 minutes to come up with something. It's the knowledge, all those little knowledge that adds up, that materializes quickly, that it's at your fingertips so that you can use it right now in the combination that makes your interpretation of those products brilliant. And so But as you're doing that, you have to analyze what's happening in front of you. And what's happening in front of me really truly is that I have a container that has blue and a mechanic slash decorative item, because it has both, that are truly blue. But the challenge that I have is, because this is a challenge I pose for myself, is that I want desperately to use this Antherium, because I had this in the shipment for my latest Creative Edge article, Tropical Creative, and I somehow didn't have an opportunity to use it. And that's just killing me, because I hate it when I have beautiful product and I didn't have a chance to use it. So I am making myself, forcing myself to use this with this container. So I have two of those. And then I also have a lot of tropicals in front of me that's still left over from the previous shoot. But, you know, the color doesn't exactly work. The only color that might work with this is actually this Guzmania. Now, it's very yellow, but remember, little bit of the spadix is on the yellowish side. So I'm trying to connect that to make sense of what I have in front of me. So there's a little bit of yellow in the spadix. And because I'm thinking of using actually the hala, which is pandanus, by the way, pandanus baptisii, which has yellow. So I think I am able to, in conjunction with the Guzmania yellow, which is golden, to the yellow spadix, to the yellow of the hala, to make the yellow a definite contender to go into this design. And of course, the yellow of this also connects because it turns into, it's almost like an ombre from yellow gold to orange. And so now that we mentioned orange, you know that orange and blue are opposite colors on the color wheel. So they become a complementary color. So really what I'm going to work with is complementary color harmony that leans on really the tints and tones of the color orange, which goes to, by the way, to the peaches, to the color blue, and which goes to the aqua, you know, like the range of blues. So I'm thinking this way because I'm trying to formulate a design that makes sense, that I'm not just slapping it together. And if you ask me, why did you do that? You know, I used to say when I first started in design, I would do a design show and I would be on stage and the commentator would come up to me and look at my design and say, oh, that's brilliant, Hitomi. So why did you make that? And I would say, I don't know, because I didn't know then. And I would say, because I felt like it. And I think a lot of us start out designing like that because it looks good, but you can't explain why it looks good. When something is good, there's a reason. And that's where teaching comes in, is teaching happens when you start to be able to tell your students the why. So being the teacher that I am, I'm really trying really hard to make sense of everything that I'm doing so that there's a lesson behind it. So I'm going to use the this beautiful cinnamon Antherium. I'm going to probably use the Guzmania. This one is called Marjan. And then I also found, well, before I go there, I also, because I know you know that I have a garden that has two varieties of dahlias only. The other varieties didn't come up. I mean, the deer and slugs ate them. So I have the Penn Hill watermelon. You've seen it in my posts many times this summer because it's one trusty flower that just keeps flowering for me. And the other one is the dark fubuki, which is this one. I love it so much and they actually go so well together. But in this one, I can't allow myself to use this because I've decided that my color harmony is going to be complementary color, or at the most, if I spread out a little bit, split complementary. This is not within a split complementary. If I do that, it turns into another story, which may stray me away from what my intent is. This is the hard part, is when you start out thinking more from the elements and principles of design, you have to provide this lesson, you have to be able to substantiate the whys behind what you do. But you can see with this one, also has the yellow, the gold into the center that turns into that peachy tone, which really does relate to, because this is just a browner version of what's happening here, that turning into the peach. And so when I say browner version, this is when we talk about the different scale. The gray scale, which goes from black to white, when you add any of the different tints and tones, or different intensity from the white to the black, gives you the tone or the tint, tone, and shade, so that it gives you the different intensity of color. But in this case, what we're doing, instead of the grayscale adding to the color orange, what we're doing is adding the brown scale so that it has that warmer brown tone to it, rather than the bluer or the grayer addition of the gray scale. So, this is what I'm doing, is using the brown scale to tone in and then to tint out. So it gets lighter, it gets a little bit more intense, and becomes more of a tone. I'm not using, actually, because I could go to this with a brown scale to go really deep brown. But if I do that, then it becomes so contrasty to the blue at the other end that I would have to anchor with a deeper blue. And I just didn't want to go there, because it feels like I'm spreading myself too thin. So I'm just not going to go there. I'm going to stay to the real light colors, the tints and tones, because really this is very light, and I want the tints to melt in. The peachy tint, the peach and brown tint, to melt in, because you can see on the side of this container there, because it's a wash, you can see the little bit of brown, the beige in there, so that it really tints in to that real light shade of brown, the browning. So that's kind of how I've analyzed what I have. I know it seems like really pretty deep, but there's a reason behind why something looks good. And I just wanted to really tell you how it works. So anyway, into this container, I'm going to pour some water so that it's nice and full to start. And I am also going to use some of these, the vine wire, Middlino wire. And because I want to establish a little bit of mechanic in there, so that there's something that's going to help support what I'm going to create in it. What I like about this is actually it's much lighter than the, I need a little longer pieces. It needs to be a little bit lighter than the usual Middlino extender, which is much heavier, because that's supposed to give a lot more physical strength to the structure. This one is a little bit less. It may guide direction, but it may not necessarily give it real strength to hold anything. It's not really like a trellis. It's a little bit more just for accenting and helping, a little bit of assistance, but I can still move it around after I have a point of attachment to be able to manipulate it in whatever way. And that's the beauty of it, because if your stems that you attach to it are attached to it, then if I wanted to lean a certain way, all I have to do is move this that's attached to it. So it gives you the different kind of positioning that you wish you had, that you don't always have when you just have the pure stem, to make it stay there. So with this one, and maybe with this one, because this additional material like this really does actually help in creating more like gridding, and more little pockets of insertions. And so I'm going to have a few of these done ahead so that it gives me more opportunities. So I'm going to attach it in several spots so that it's stable and it doesn't slide around. Actually, this may be, so it's like this. maybe this one I'll extend out and in so that it gives you a little bit more interesting little side shoot that I may use or I may not. I mean, I'm actually just kind of constructing it just to give myself more opportunities. That's all I'm doing right here. Actually, this may stabilize better if these two are actually attached, because this gives me a little pocket on the side to slip in something, but this gives me stability. So if something's attached to there and there, you have something. The tips of these are very thin, and so I think I will do a little video to show how that's done. But something like this to start. And I will go ahead and snip these ends off with my little end cutter so that all that mechanic is gone and it's cleaner. So I mean, I have more, so I can certainly do more, and we'll see if it's necessary. So next, what I want to do is I want to just sort of start the different components that I feel really works with this particular design. I'm just going to add this one more spot because I like some of these openings are really big, broad, and that if there's not little mini openings in between, it doesn't hold stem just that well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that there as well. So it's here. So what I'm gonna do now is to sort of go through the different components. The first component that I am for sure gonna use is the Antherium, but I'm not gonna place it just yet because I wanna sort of set the mood for it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, because this is just a little treasure, you won't think it's a treasure, but it is for me. Because I'm gonna use a combination of Dahlia and the Antherium. So this is like, this had fallen, you know, because we had quite a storm. It had fallen. And of course, as a consequence, like this, because it was on the ground, the slugs had been eating it, and it's just really awful. But what I saw when I went out there this morning was that, and I see a break, which is really a shame. Well, I might be able to fix that. Is I saw this little crook. And I don't know if this is going to materialize, but it intrigued me enough to pick it. So in order to expose it to show the beauty of what I saw, I'm going to just take away some of that. Of course, that horrible leaf that's been eaten will be taken away. Maybe I will take this one away and this one away. We'll see if it's worth anything. This away, strip it. Probably cut away this one, and I'm going to cut away these chewed up ones, of course, so that I just have that little bit of something there. And this one here, it's broken. Oh my God, that's so sad because I love it so much. So I'm going to salvage it because it's not completely broken off. I'm going to go ahead and tie it so that I can see it right there, that little curve that it had created. So that it's there. And I'm going to take away this one also. And let's see if this is anything. It may not be, but I was hopeful. So maybe it's like this, so that it has, see, I saw this, right? And you rarely see that in Dahlia. The only time you see this is when it's fallen down and it's trying to get up. It's trying to get up, and then it gets knocked down because the rain was raining so hard, and then it's trying to get up again. So it's doing that. So I really like what had happened. And I'm seeing now that this may not be it either here, this leaf. It's eaten. And at least it's not the story today. It could be a story when the story is about the insect survival amongst these giant plants. So that's another story. But I still love this, so I think I'm going to use it because I love the fact that, you know, with Dahlia, it was obvious to me that it's not about big open, the biggest Penhill watermelon. It's really about the buds and sort of semi-open ones. So anyway, and by the way, to cheat a little, and I did, this was not Penn Hill watermelon. This is Fubuki, the dark Fubuki, and you can see it when you look really closely into it that it's really that purple, but it doesn't matter because it is a beautiful bud of a dahlia that goes with the story. So maybe it's being supported like this. It's just temporary for now. We're just going to kind of look at it as that as a possibility. Do I like that or not? I'm not liking the way it leans to that side, so I'm going to just move it over so that it leans a little bit more towards the center, so that it really does speak a little bit more. So, it may get lost in it all, but I saw that story and I want to be able to tell it that this is really worthy of something. So the other thing that I wanted to do was to bring in, because this apparently now is going to be the front, and I'm just going to move it over a little bit so that I'm just going to show you in a moment, so that it's in the middle of these two legs, and I want this to be the center right here. So what I'm going to do is, given that that's the center, and let's see, maybe I'm going to have to move this even a little bit more. So I want to punctuate this at the bottom. These were really short. This Penn Hill watermelon is very small because it was one of the side shoots where I've cut so many that some of the side blossoms were much smaller. But that's perfect for me because the others are much too big. And so I'm going to put that right at the bottom, right into the heart of this design, and I'm going to cut it shorter because this is actually a little too long, so that it's right in the heart of it, so that really it takes away a little bit of the blue, because clearly there's actually too much blue, but yet you want to make sure that the blue is present to say the story is about blue and orange or peach. So that's how I'm going to start. And then I'm going to work with dahlias first, because they're going to be a little bit more difficult than working with Antherium. Antherium is thin leaves or thin stem, and it's just sleek, so it slips into anywhere. So I want to take care of some of the other things first. So the other dahlia I want to use is a bigger one, and so it's heavier. And I'm going to strip away the leaves because this is going to be a lot cleaner kind of a look. So where am I going to put this one? So I want to bring it up high, maybe to the back, because the front is already covered. So I want to balance it out to the back. So I'm going to try to position it in a spot that will allow this stem to go in such a way. It's going in nicely. But this one probably needs some help in some way. Maybe it needs to be helped by this one here, so that it faces a little bit more towards the middle rather than smack forward, coming forward, because then you get a different proportion of color showing. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this to this one. Now this vine, kind of the wire Middlino vine, is not really strong. It's a little bouncy because it's made to be light like a vine, but in support with other connection, it can become much stronger. So we'll see what happens next. So I'm going to go with that. It's a little bouncy, so we'll see what we need to do to make it even stronger. But you can see now how this is turning out. Like you can see this at the base, this a little bit tilting over that direction so that the visual weight is not so heavy. You're catching the edge, but you see the beautiful shapes of the petals. So what am I going to do after that? Well, it's obvious to me. This is where I connect with a tropical, because look at these bracts, the petaling is very similar to dahlia, the shapes, but instead of curling, it just actually reflexes. So it gives you, and also each layer of petal is much more compounded with dahlia. This is more stretched out. So it really is a stretched version. If you actually squish this down and compound it, you're gonna get something that looks a little bit like dahlia, but a little bit stiffer. So I'm gonna use this to the back so that it kind of creates an anchor to the back, maybe right into that side, so that I have this. This is what we're looking at. So there's a definite relationship by color because there's yellow and gold that goes into the peach, which will address the kind of the peachy orangey side. So next, I'm gonna finish up with another dahlia because I wanna do the dahlias first because they're actually a little bit more fragile than the other flowers. So with this one, I'm gonna go to the front because I wanna cradle it right into this guy here because they need more support than the tropicals. Tropicals are really, the stems are much stronger, and so I'm not gonna have to spend the time to cradle it like I do with this one. So with this one, it's obvious if I want it for it to stay in the right spot, it's obvious that it's going to need support. So I'm going to actually allow the vine to wrap around it so that I can control it a little bit better, so that it's something like this. So that you have to the back, middle, forward. Obviously, I'll need some, when you look at it from the side like this, you can see that visual balance. We need some balance back in here, but we'll deal with that later, probably with foliage. But it's starting to happen. So next, the exciting material I'm going to use, because I want to kind of work with some of the heavier material first, because I know exactly what the amount of weight and the thickness of the Antherium, so I can do that really at the end. But I found this. Oh my gosh. So I have a lot of succulents. I have quite a succulent collection, and right now some of my echeverias are flowering. And it's just that really the beautiful orange peach, which is the next level of intensity from the dahlia. And it helps connect to the orange on the bracts right there. But the real gift is it's actually a blue-green foliage that goes with this container. It's a perfect marriage of kind of, segueing between the blue and the orange because it's present just exactly in this particular material. So I'm gonna sort of tuck that in wherever there's space. We'll see where that is. So maybe we're going to work with it maybe to the front, right here. And in order to do that one, to make it stay, I may need to actually attach it with a wire to this because there's a little bit of weight involved and it could sort of be tippy frontward. So I'm going to just go ahead and attach that because that's what's there for. Some of that man-made mechanic is there to be able to help out where it can. So I have this, and then I want to go with this to the back so that it's right there at the base to give it a little bit of anchoring to the back. And again, because I don't want it is heavier material because it's succulent, I don't want it to slip around and destroy the balance that I am creating. I'm going to attach it to the armature that's been created with the Middleno wire vine. And that way too, I'm giving it dimensionality. I'm going forward and backwards. And it has that little crook that goes that way and this like this. So it's just a little bit of an embrace that's going on right there.
James Malloy is asking if you know the name of that succulent. He's been looking for it since he left California.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I have to look it up for you. I don't know it off the top of my head. It is an echeveria. It is a type of echeveria. So I'll get back to you. In fact, I'll email you afterwards. So the interesting thing is I also have a little bit of sedum that is actually the color of and these are great because these will help actually sort of plop into different spots that'll give you nice tight sort of basing. It helps cover up a little bit of that mechanic and give you a little bit of the texture and color that really plays so beautifully with what we've got going on. So I can just pop those in a couple of different spots, because I really don't necessarily want the blue to be just so glaring. I want you to be able to see just hints of it, so that we're actually being inspired by it, but not so much that it takes over. But it really helps to have this, to be able to give it a little bit of oomph and weight, maybe a little bit to the back. You can see that. So it's interesting, when you really try to design sort of academically, like what am I doing here, and what am I trying to achieve here? It's a really a different way, but it makes it's kind of problem solving. Oops, I just moved something that I wanted at the base move, but also moved the whole thing. It's all connected. Okay, so next thing I want to do is actually go into the Antherium. So let's see, where does it play? Should we go into it sort of towards the back and bring it in? Let's look at it and see what happens. Actually, that kind of works. Maybe attached. We'll see. And then more to the front. The attitude of this one is a little troubling. I'm trying to get it to do, sort of be the right spot, and to be able to see it a little bit better. So it may be that I'm going to tie this in so it stays exactly where I want it to go. And I'm going to snip that off. So that you can see that, like that. So now what I'm going to do, this is the part that's kind of crazy. I think you'll see the mix is going to be quite interesting, I think. Is I'm going to attempt to use Pompous Grass, because it's that time of the year, but it's sort of kind of weird in a way, because I have succulents mixed with, because sedum, of course, is also succulent, and tropical and real garden flower. Like it's a pretty harsh combination of material. So I actually, to use Pampas grass could be interesting. And so what I'm going to do is work with this big one. Let's see where that's going to go. Maybe towards the back. Okay, towards the back. Maybe more like that. So it's just fluffy in the back. The reason why I'm going to do this, because I'm going to show you something that's going to happen in the front in a minute. Because when I design, this is one of the things about sort of Ikebana-ish, is it's Ikebana is really a 3-point design, because it really is, for every item, every stem that you design to the back, you sort of go almost directly to the front and design to the front, and then the third one is somewhere in between, so that it gives you a triangular sort of placement of material. And what that gives you, it's like anything, like triangle gives you stability. It gives you balance. And so by going to the back, to the front, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, I'm going to sort of adjust it a little bit to see if I can get just a little bit of different flow out of it. This is going to serve in 2 different ways. So I'm going to the front, like this with it. So I'm going to the back and to the front. I'm thinking that maybe I'm gonna put this to the front of this, some of it, and some of it to the back, so that it actually cuts the line of that wire. See if that works. It's different. We'll see how this works. I'm going to trim away a little bit of it and bring a little bit of it to the side so that you can see that little bit to the side. I'll show you in a minute. So that you see something like this going on, like that. So what this is interesting, because what it is I'm trying to melt the colors, the intensity of colors that are happening more towards the top, like a deeper colors are at the top, and it's getting lighter and lighter, so it's becoming more of a tint. I mean, the pampas grass still has a little bit of brown to it, as does the sedum, and then the peach, the softer, lighter tints of the color of the dahlia, and that it's melting into the color that's on the pot, so that we don't have a huge color contrast right at the lip of the container that is about dark and light, that it really starts to melt, so that you don't have the story of stark contrast at the container line. I know that sounds like a little bit like you're getting into it too deep into this thing, but really in so many ways, if I'm designing for in a competition, in a surprise package, where they're looking on the judging sheet and they're looking at color, proportion, they're looking at texture, they're looking at, you know, the contrast, depth, all of that, like where they're looking at these different criteria one at a time. You know, the key is to make sure each one of those stories speaks when we are looking at it. And that's why the elements and principles of design, and sort of not necessarily abiding by it, it's just by knowing that when you have those stories built into the design, it reads and people will see it because you put the story in there, so you will see it. That's the whole idea. So having done that, now I'm going to go in and do a little bit of greening. So the greening is this, because I have yellow, and even though this is very much sort of a real hodgepodge combination, but I do want to put some greens in there. And so I'm going to actually work with hala, or the pandanus. I'm going to go kind of tall with this one, and we hope that there's space for it in here. Oh yeah, well you always have that problem for me because
It's just gonna be really loud.
oh, okay, I'll try not to. And I'm gonna try to put this on here with a little bit of glue to attach to the mechanic that I've created. Let's see if it's gonna work. Now, if it doesn't work, what you should do is to give it like just extra security by just going over it with a little dab of Oasis glue, so that you're not just dependent on the U-glue. So I'm going like this, and is it okay if I just move it a little bit so that it's not in the way of? Is that okay? Okay, that's good. So we're gonna do that. So as you can see, like in this particular design, I must not use the whole hala because it's too big. Like, look at the footing here. How can it support the thickness of this? That's just way too wide. And I really more wanted the yellow in it than the green. So I just went ahead and sliced it to make it narrower. So I'm just gonna strip it down so it's narrower. And I have these sort of the side pieces that are limp. I'm gonna just go ahead and clean this up a little bit more to the tip. So it's like this, and then the other side. Because it still has a main rib that keeps it nice and rigid, so that you still get that nice classic curve that you get out of it, the curvilinearness. But at least what you're getting is a little bit more. Well, I love the twist on that one. That's why I chose that one. But it's narrower and it's more easily workable into a design like this. So the next thing I did was I took a hala and did the same thing. But what I did was trim it out even tighter so that the top became a little bit more limp. Because that's how I actually transition the real stiff curvilinear to a much more lax curvilinear. So with this one, I'm going to go a little bit to the back. You know what? This kind of designing is really hard because I'm kind of trying to provide lessons at the same time that I'm designing. And so, you're in a way, you're kind of like, oh, like it's hard to make it work. But let's see what happens here. So maybe, so maybe what I need to do is bring that in front of this so it stays forward a little bit. See, that's what all that is for. That little extra mechanic helps it stay in the corner that I want. So I want to go like this, because now I'm going to show you in a minute as I do this. Because so now I have this hala kind of bending down and flowing in. And it's giving me a lot more interesting movement. What I'm seeing here is I want this to go a little bit further back, like that there, that's better. Because from the side, the balance, if this is the vertical axis, I want this one to be the back of and this one to the front. I want to always observe that. So now I have that. And then the best part now is that we got these side pieces that are totally limp. And this was intentional. This was totally intentional, even though I'm doing it at the end. But it's intentional because, as you know, at the very beginning, my newfound mechanic is all about this. And because it's blue and we are covering it up a little bit so that it's a little bit less blue, even though it's a story about blue and orange, are complementary. But what I'm going to do now is slip this in and repeat the same kind of movement that there is in that circle. Just want to bring this back where it needs to be, so that I'm repeating what was the actual structure of the mechanic, the newfound mechanic. So I'm actually weaving into it to get, and you can see this. Let me just get this back on track. What I might have to do, actually, because this is a little weak, I might have to do is link this one to that one, because the weight of the dahlia is rather substantial and it tends to swing because of it. So I'm just going to link it together so that it holds up better, so much better. I'm going to bring this down so it's not front center, it's down a little bit lower. That's better. So you can see now it's much better. So also you can see what's happening with this, that it's being woven in, slipped out on this side, and then I'm going to use the next one also, and this is where I'm going to start to kind of swing out a little bit and get a little bit more out of it. So this is a reason why I have this side, and I'll show you this in a minute, this side piece. Like you can see this side piece that I created with that loop that I created, that it gives you an opportunity for that piece to be used. And then I'm going to slip this in some more so that you get the crisscrossing. And then on the back side, I'm going to use a little bit of U glue so that you can see that the structure, which was twirling around and around, that was the whole structure of it, that it continues so that with the dynamic lines of these pieces of challah that are stripped. So I'm going to try to do that, if I can just get this on there. Okay, so I'm going to do that so that you can see that repeated on the back side. And then this brought in, so it's woven in so that you can again see how it continues, so that there's that, so that it's not just a separate entity that you're just designing into, that there's a relationship of how I'm designing into it, that it really is about that continual, that piece of, like I'm going to take another, and maybe I will allow this little bit of the yellow edge to stay in place, so that it flows. So now I'm going around, and let's see. In some ways, it might have been wise, and this is some things that happen, that some of this is done ahead of time. That lesson would have been much more clearly seen, I think. But anyway, I'm my mind sort of wanders a lot, and I go from this to that often, as you probably know by now. But you can see how that gives you that repetition. Repetition is a very important principle of design. And so when you see that, you see that there's a definite connection. In this case, the technique, the use of the material, in a very similar way that was spun in that glass. I think that's really, really important. I'm going to use one more because I have it. And this actually, without it really completely filling the middle of that sort of sphere, so you can see this repetition sort of right into the heart of it. And this is what I want, is, and I also want it to sort of explode. So I'm going to now try to use this. Sometimes I get a little carried away with the story, and I want this and I want that, and this is where you have to really watch the number of techniques you use so that it's not an overkill. But in this case, I think it's possible, because it's kind of like this material is sort of exploding and it's unwinding. That's kind of what I'm trying to project here, so that the structure then becomes part of the upper design, is really what I wanted to create, so that there's a certain relationship, story of a relationship that you're trying to convey. It's like anything. This is where the elements and principles of design becomes really a very useful part of designing, is that when you build the story into it, and when you have an opportunity to explain why you did what you did, you're able to make sense of it. So sometimes it's like, way to defend your work. It's kind of like when you're writing a thesis and you've written that this is and such is the story, and then now you have to be able to defend it. So this is exactly what really teaching is anyway, is how do you teach a student why this works and why that other one didn't. It's because you have to be able to explain the whys behind it. And so this is the way I have done that. So there's one more thing that I feel like I need to do, and that is to substantiate, like to give it a little bit of something. Let's see, what did I have in mind? Okay, I have these dried material because I used dried material, I felt like it would be okay. Okay, so we're having a little problem here with this pampas grass being on one side and then the other. This could be maybe moved back a little bit so that it does that little bit better. Okay, and then this could be sort of the in between, the light little pinky side of the peach, so that okay. I'm not really liking that one. It's a little too much. Just want to make sure that everything that I put in already resonates. That's the most important part. So and this needs to come to the front. And this needs to be more, I can shape it, so it needs to be more where I want it to be. That's the best part about that. I think this is not bad. Actually, one of these, I'm going to just wrap it up now because I can go on and on, couldn't I? Yes, I can. So what I want to do is just bring that to the heart so that it's there, into the middle, not to the front, but into the heart, so that you can see the different components flowing forward. And then I can also tuck this into the back. That might be the best way to use this, is to get a little bit of back coverage with this extension to the back. So it's something like this, so that that material flows through to the back. So what do you think? This is basically, let me just go around real quick to see if it's the position that we're looking for. So I like that kind of sort of slightly side to side-ness of that pampas grass, so that it kind of drapes like this, backed by that, this piece to the front, this to the side, anchored, and then just lightness through the middle. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. It's definitely more of a formalinear design, but still very gardeny. Challenging because of the kind of material that I had to work with. It's and it really was a lot about color story and the mechanics to make it happen, the positioning of material where it needs to be, use of dry material in combination with fresh, and such diverse material, combination of the succulents with tropicals, with the garden flower, and with a dried material. I mean, it's got everything in it, but you can see how I work through it. That's really the whole idea behind designing with what you have. What can you get out of it? What is the story that is most prevalent, that shows up the best, connecting it all? And do you kind of understand the whole melting into the container, how important the container is, that it plays into it? You can see that I used the overlay of pampas grass to the front so that it cuts the edge of it. So it's not just the edge of the container with flower above it, that it flows down into it. Really, pampas grass is in many ways actually a great bridge between like a spiky tropical, because even though the shape of it, because a plume, is spiky, but it's soft at the same time. So it has an ability to sort of marry, one to the other. So basically, that's how I used it, so that you can feel that energy of the softness in amongst the hardness. So I hope that was helpful in explaining what's happening here and how I attempted to marry all these diverse materials together by way of using elements and principles of design.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, we'll take about 5-10 minutes to field questions. And yeah, just let us know if anybody has any questions.
Oh, now I get to read some of the things that people are writing in.
I guess while
Yeah, go
we're
ahead.
waiting, you can maybe talk about what you have coming up. We have Creative Edge coming out next week.
Yes. So with the Patreon group yesterday, we had a meetup, and we actually had Eric Tanoe from Greenpoint Nurseries, who supplied me with the tropicals, in on the conversation, because I think it's very important to know your product, to know who your growers are, and what beautiful things that they're growing at any given time, so that you're kind of up on what's going on there. So that was really great. And so I gave a little update or preview or overview, advanced overview on the Creative Edge article for October, which is called Tropical Creative. And, I sort of, and you'll see the article, but I really did revisit a little bit about all the different kinds of work I've done in the past. And that's one of the things that you must never forget, is what's in the past does not have to be totally erased, because there's a lot of things that we've done in all the years that are worthy, and for some reason you moved away from it because things are changing. But I felt like a couple of the things, well, all of the things that I did for this particular article is relevant today more than ever. And I did use some of the concepts that's from the past that I was very, very excited to share. So really, really exciting article coming up. That's the article itself will come out
As
on
usual,
October
yeah,
1st.
it comes out on the 1st. The article, along with the overview video, the Patreon patrons do get a bit of a sneak peek into it this week, early or tomorrow. But yeah, it'll go public for free via her website, the article, and here on YouTube, the overview video, along with a couple tutorials on the days to follow.
I'm really liking that I can see my design on screen, because actually when you kind of compress it, because with photography filming, it, the depth is not quite as strong, but I can see that I really achieved the depth in it. This is really good. It's kind of like looking in the mirror to see if something looks really good from another set of eyes. That's another thing that's really important, that and I encouraged everyone yesterday in the meetup that there's nothing wrong with, creating something and giving yourself strokes when you have done something really brilliant. I mean, you're the only one that's listening to it, so praise yourself all you want when you've had success. But do look at it from another set of eyes, so that you're not so skewed from your point of view. That's why looking in the mirror is important. Taking a picture of it is important, so you can see that all the different principles that you put in it does resonate when somebody else sees it. And that's what a camera does, is it gives you another set of eyes. It's a lens that shows you from that perspective. And that's really important, because after all, we do share the pictures, we do share the films, and that's what they are seeing. And so we need to really think about how to photograph and how to film.
Yeah, and I'll also just maybe mention that since we were talking about Creative Edge that's coming up this week with tropicals, maybe you want to touch a little bit on something that's coming up at the beginning of next month that you've mentioned a bit on Instagram and on Patreon, but I'm not sure if we've mentioned it on YouTube. Which is the Hawaii Celebrations event.
Oh yeah, the Wedding Celebration 2020 is 2 days of actually free content of how to use tropicals, and especially in relation to the wedding work. And the Hawaiians do some absolutely fabulous work with a lot of their destination weddings, and a lot of it involves, some pure tropicals and a lot of the tropical nouveau, the mixes, to create a balance to make it stunning, but also very pretty, very beautiful, that there's a softness and romance about it. So that happens on October 9th and 10th. And so please go to their website, Hawaii Tropical. It's www.hawaiitropical.
So yeah, you want to go to hawaiineotropica.com. There they have the links to register for the webinar itself. It's the 9th and 10th. And again, it's free to register. It's free to watch. And if you do register and can't attend on the 9th or 10th, it does give you the link to be able to watch the full webinar replay after the fact as well.
Yeah. And, my really good friends like Sue Tabao Yamaguchi, AIFD EMC, Lois Hiranaga, AIFD, Allison, what is her last name?
Pardon, who?
Allison.
Allison Higgins.
Higgins, thank you, from Grace Flowers on the Big Island, and Dottie Reynolds Yadal from Kauai. They'll be presenting, as well as myself on both days. I have 2 programs on both days. And then we have the Canadians like Brenna Kwan, AIFD, Suzanne Law, AIFD, EMC. We have Bruno Duarte from Toronto, who will also be presenting, as well as Poppy Parsons, AIFD. So it's really quite a nice lineup, and it's all wedding work using tropical flowers. So you'll really enjoy that. So I'm looking at one of the comments that was made. Crystal Hill, she says, it just slipped up, I can't see. So it says, funny you bring up surprise package competing testing, and I'll be doing that in November. So your videos are fantastic for me for inspiration and learning. Thank you. Yeah, like that's one of the things that I mentioned, surprise package. Like you gotta have your brain wired so that it just clicks from one thing to the other. So that as you look at your product, you want to get excited about it. That's one of the things with surprise package that you must do, is take away anything that doesn't do anything for you. Love the things that you pick to use, because when you love it, you have a direct connection and you kick into the whole process of creating luck quicker. So that's one of my big trick with surprise package. Don't keep looking at something that puzzles you, because that just delays the process of creativity. Take it away, put it under the table so you don't see it, so you don't question it. Because that's one of the things that people tend to do when you're not sure, is you keep doubting that, why have I not used that? And then if you are bad enough, I say bad enough, it's like insecure enough to look to the right and to the left and you see them using it, that makes you even more insecure. You have to be sure. That's why you have to pick things that you love. So that's just a tip. I competed for many years, and so I have really a sort of a real rule book on how I approach it and the steps to how I determine and make quick decisions. And one of the first thing is practicing daily with any material that you have at the end of the day, and to see if you can create something absolutely beautiful with a bunch of leftovers. That practicing that every day makes you become very well versed in being very quick with your judgment, and to know how to use even little tricks that you never think of to be valuable on its own, but in conjunction with another marries into something absolutely fabulous.
So I want to thank Vintage Puny for commenting that, asking about maybe putting up the links to the Hefna Wedding Celebrations event. So for those of you who are live here on the comment section, I did put both the link to Hawaii Neotropica, that's the Hefna website, as well as the direct Crowdcast link to the webinar itself for you to register. So check those out in the comment section. We do have also a question from James Malloy. He asks, do you work those lines to draw the eye to the bottom on purpose, or does it happen subconsciously?
Actually, the whole idea is unity in the end. You usually have to unify your design fairly close to your main binding point. I mean, that's why focal emphasis area for so many years were at the very bottom, at the base, where everything sort of emerges from. And because of the fact that just rules and really pattern of designing for so many years is the heavier stuff is at the bottom. So instead of using this dahlia up here, this antherium up here, those usually would have been more towards the bottom to give it some weight at the bottom and give it that focal emphasis area. But in this particular design, I've developed the focal emphasis area really with the Antherium because they're the most unique flower. They're the form flower. They're the show-off flower for me. So I wanted to put that up there and take away the importance of the usual focal emphasis area at the bottom. But I made it subtle enough that your eyes are still drawn down to it, and then it flows out of it. So the whole sort of cloud of pampas grass kind of keeps it lighter, so it's not so heavy, because that's what keeps this design looking much more interesting, more exciting, because it doesn't have that weight, like the real physical visual weight at the bottom. It kind of obscures it with almost like a cloud. So there's a certain presence, but it's nice and light. And having the lightness at the bottom with a little bit more heavy weight at the top makes it a much more interesting design. In fact, it's a little bit more like Ikebana in that the flowers are out in 3-point, and then down at the bottom simply is the Kenzan. And they don't mind showing the Kenzan. They don't cover it up like we do with foam. Or, any of our mechanics were so anal in floristry about covering the mechanics at the base, so that's why you plop in something big and heavy at the bottom. But I did that much more lightly with the pampas grass sort of radiating out of that small dahlia so that one thing melts out into the other. I'm always about a certain emotion or certain action that I want people to see. And of course, I put it out there deliberately for that purpose. And you can see that the dahlia, because it's so light and small, but it just kind of melts into air by way of the pampas grass. To me, I think that shows a certain emotion, a certain interpretation that is unique and different. And that I'm always striving for something that people say, well, I never thought of doing that, or doing it that way, or I never thought that the story could be like that. Because don't you see that it's sort of blurs out of the design, so that it's so different than that definite anchor. We're always looking for different ways that we can make flowers speak. And so that's why I had to use it, because even though it was a little bit sketchy whether it was going to work or not, I had to use it just so that I can illustrate what I'm talking about and what the story is. And so I am hoping that you guys, sort of taking this in, start to see the possibility, the potential of different way of looking at flowers, and thinking of different ways you can get an effect, a different kind of storytelling. And I think more and more for me, these diaphanous material that's so light and airy that just sort of disappears into thin air is such a perfect statement about the state of things. Like, let it just evaporate. Let it just sort of disappear into the cloud, because I just feel like that lightness just feels so good. Maybe it's underlying desire to be done with it and go to heaven. I don't know. It's just there's stories that you can tell, and I think it's really, really important.
So is there anything you want to add before we sign off? Or
Well, what I just want to say is I hope that you kind of got some of this. I know that I kind of go on and sort of talk about a lot of things, but a lot of things are going through my head, and I just want to make sure that I share every parts of it, because little parts that may seem insignificant can be something that triggers something in you. And I really want that. I really want that ability to share with you every detail of it, so that nothing is missed. So if there's any further question, because sometimes this is what happens. I mean, this is exactly what happened from just yesterday when I kind of put that out there, what I was going to do, to what I did today, because it's a sequence of things that went through my head that made me trigger the version 1, 2, 3. Like, I wasn't intending to do that, but I just thought that is such a good lesson. I have to share it with you. So if something percolates, it's not happening right now, but it's percolating in you, and you have this moment of brilliance, like half hour later, an hour later, thinking like, I got it. What if I did this? What if I did that? Or what is a way to do this or that? Please don't hesitate to just comment. And, just kind of send me a little Instagram little message, because I thrive on all those thoughts. I want to think about challenges and how to overcome it. I want to be able to provide you answers, because for most of us, when we start to move up into a time in your career where you really want to share and you want to teach, it's so important to address all these thoughts that comes through our mind to be able to answer it. It's okay sometimes to say, you know what, I don't know the answer, I'll look it up for you. But more and more that you address these unknown and these new challenges, the more you're able to explain to your eager students how they can do this too. So I would like to end with that. I think that's a good lesson. So I hope you enjoyed it all, and happy Sunday to you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. And as we mentioned, look for next YouTube video will be probably Creative Edge this upcoming week on the 1st. So until then, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you then.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.